Tensions between China and Taiwan have hit a high not seen in years. Most recently, Chinese warplanes crossed the median line, the narrow strait separating the two sides over the past week. That's according to Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen. The United States plays a role in all this as Taiwan's main supporter. The Trump administration plans to sell Taiwan billions of dollars in weapons, from missiles to surveillance drones, in order to shore up its defenses against any potential attack by Beijing. Taiwan is a democracy with a separate government, but President Xi Jinping considers it a part of his People's Republic of China.
A rousing reception for Taiwan's leader as she meets Air Force officers at one of the territory's most important military bases. President Tsai Ing-wen was there to deliver a special message following a spike in tensions between Taiwan and China. As the Commander-in-Chief of our National Armed Forces, I want to assure the people that our National Army officers and soldiers are absolutely capable and determined to defend the country and safeguard regional peace. It was from this base that pilots scrambled jets to intercept nearly 40 Chinese warplanes and bombers that had entered Taiwan's air defense zone. It was not the first time this had happened, as these images of Chinese fighter jets earlier in September show. But analysts say last week's intrusions were an unusually large display of force by Beijing. Taiwan, for its part, is determined to prove it's prepared to defend itself. This live-fire exercise in July is one of a number this year, simulating a response to a Chinese invasion. Relations between Beijing and Taipei have become strained since the election in 2016 of President Tsai Ing-wen, in part over her rejection of Beijing's view that Taiwan is part of one China. Yet tensions have also been fueled by the presence of this man in Taiwan. In August, US Health Secretary Alex Azar became the highest-ranking American official to visit Taiwan since 1979. His visit comes as the Trump administration increases its support for Taipei as ties with Beijing sour. China's reaction was furious. It is a political provocation to China. It encourages the arrogance of the separatist forces for Taiwan independence and undermines Sino-US relations and peace and stability. China firmly opposes this and strongly condemns it. Taiwan's leader has warned China to back off, but there's little sign that Beijing will comply with her wishes.
Joining us is Dexter Roberts. He was formerly Bloomberg Businessweek's correspondent in Beijing, and his latest book is called The Myth of Chinese Capitalism: The Worker, the Factory, and the Future of the World. Before we get into the economic angle to all of this, because there is definitely an economic angle, but do you think the characterization is correct that tensions between China and Taiwan are at their worst in years?
Yeah, I'm afraid that they are. We're seeing a situation now where China is threatening Taiwan both verbally through its state media, which is openly talking about war, and of course in reality with the PLA Air Force doing this onslaught of flights across the unofficial midline in the Taiwan Strait in recent days. The foreign ministry spokesperson in China responded to the concern in Taiwan by saying there is no midline in the Taiwan Strait because all of it, the Strait and Taiwan included, belong to China.
And of course, there is a complex economic component to all of this. Taiwan, China, and the United States all do a tremendous amount of business with each other, right?
That's right. Yeah, the relationship between those three places, the U.S., China, and Taiwan, is extremely close economically. You have a situation where some of the very top products by top U.S. companies, Apple iPhones, Apple iPads, Dell laptops, the list goes on. They are produced in China by very, very large Taiwanese OEM suppliers, companies like Foxconn, Pegatron, and Wistron, in very large factories there in China. At the same time, you have many of the top U.S. multinationals, companies like Intel, Micron, General Motors, Qualcomm, Starbucks, the list goes on, that are deeply reliant on the Chinese market for their growth. So they would simply be much smaller companies if they did not have this very significant market in China. And then the final thing is you have literally tens of thousands of mainly business people from Taiwan that are resident in China, and you have tens of thousands of U.S. citizens also living there. It's an extremely, extremely close and entwined economic relationship.
So how does this matter to regional neighbors?
Well, I think that you look around the region, and almost everywhere you look, you see sources of tension already very much alive between China and its neighbors. If you look in the South China Sea, if you look in the East China Sea around the Senkaku Islands or the Diaoyu Tai, if you look on the Indian-Chinese border, there's already real tensions there. Almost every one of China's neighbors, rather, is already involved in some kind of conflict with China. If you look at, again, Vietnam in the South China Sea, Japan up in the East China Sea, we saw the bloody violent clash on the Indian-Chinese border. Australia's been threatened by China. I think that they've already got plenty of problems. The last thing they want to do is be pulled into a situation where there's a real conflict between the U.S., China, and Taiwan, and they're being asked to take sides. I think they're between a real rock and a hard place. On the one hand, they're deeply reliant on the Chinese economy. On the other hand, they don't want to be pulled in, and certainly don't want to be sort of put under the thumb of this newly assertive China.
So the neighbors are all watching, and as they watch the situation continue to deteriorate, will this change if the U.S. elects Biden as president? And that's, of course, assuming the premise that the U.S. is what determines relations and not what President Xi or President Tsai does.
Yeah, I think, Melissa, you bring up a very good point. We're only going to see an election, as we know, in Washington. We're not going to see any change of leadership in Beijing. Xi Jinping, the party secretary, has made it very clear that he has no intention of moving on. And I don't think that China under Xi Jinping, there's no suggestion that they want to abandon this newly assertive role in the region and globally, including militarily. So that's not going to go away, and that tension is likely to continue to be just as much a problem as it is now. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that what we've seen in the U.S. is really the emergence of a bipartisan consensus that is deeply skeptical of China's motivations globally and very worried about what comes next.
Dexter Roberts, thank you.